the question I'm going to ask you is whether it matters, and also something I only allow myself to do very rarely on the programme, because otherwise it makes for very, very lazy radio. And although I'm hugely in favour of very, very lazy radio from the presenter's perspective, I appreciate that from the listener's perspective it can be less attractive. I'm going to ask whether you care. And if not, why not? Because I'm pretty sure I do. But I do suffer from my Catholic upbringing, Catholic with a capital C. And by suffer, I mean I sometimes have a slightly sententious or overly judgmental moral compass. And I do subscribe still to the belief that what goes on in private life can be a reliable indicator of what might happen in public life. And that if a man, for example, can lie to his wife, then he will be quite comfortable lying to a select committee or a parliament or an entire country. I don't know whether that is a valid view anymore. It's valid, but I don't know whether it is an important view anymore. I really don't. So the reason why they were so desperate to keep this story out of the Times, and of course it is for the man who was editing that night, Tony Gallagher, and the woman in charge of the entire operation, Rebecca Brooks, to explain why they acceded to Downing Street's requests in such a shameless and anti-journalistic fashion. If you ever get the chance to ask them, please do, because I certainly never will. The reason why they were so keen to keep this story out of the newspapers is that there was grave concern, according to Private Eye, who have some of the hardest working lawyers in the whole of the British media. So I just get that out there front and centre early doors, was because of the details that weren't published by the Times. So this is like the Streisand effect squared. John Ashcroft, who accepted a peerage from David Cameron after making various promises about his offshore finances, published a book a couple of years ago which originally broke this story. It described how aides at the Foreign Office were wary of Boris Johnson's desire to give Carrie Symonds a job because they had become aware of the fact that he was having an extramarital affair with her. He was having an adulterous affair with her. And the way in which they became aware was because an MP who was used to dropping into Johnson's parliamentary office without warning walked in abruptly and found Johnson and his current wife, then mistress, in what has been described as a compromising situation. The Friday night attack of the Abdabs at number 10 was caused by a baseless fear that the Times might be more specific about the compromising situation, Private Eye reports. So it wasn't so much the fact that Johnson was trying to secure a six-figure job for his mistress. It was about the way in which Foreign Office aides and other colleagues had found out that the woman was his mistress. And that is the bit where listeners of a timid disposition, which is the phrase the editor of Private Eye uses in yesterday's edition, might just want to turn the volume down briefly. I don't think this qualifies as a complete trigger warning, but certainly if you have younger children in the car with you at the moment or over the brunch table, just be aware. An MP walked into the House of Commons and found the Foreign Secretary's mistress performing a sex act on the Foreign Secretary in the House of Commons estate, or in the Foreign Office. No, it would be his parliamentary office in 2018. And that was the reason why, although none of it was reported at the time, people knew she was his mistress. Otherwise, presumably, he'd have been able to get her a six-figure job as Director of Communications. I'm going to say that once more, and we're not going to dwell on this, and we're not going to be prurient or puerile, because this is, I think, the country deserves better than to be sniggering about this stuff, but it also deserves a lot better than to be silent about it. The reason why Foreign Office aides and other colleagues of the then Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson knew that the woman he was trying to secure a six-figure job for as a Director of Communications in one of the great offices of state in this country is because they were disturbed in the middle of a sex act on a sofa in his parliamentary office by another MP. I'll stick in a reportedly and an allegedly, but the detail in Private Eye is eye-wateringly frank. And as I say, John Ashcroft, who sort of bought his way to prominence in journalism and polling and publishing and various other areas, had also published a more watered-down version of events. So there it is. 10:16 is the time. I'm going to get on my high horse now and tell you I think this is gross. I think it's disgusting. I can just about make allowances for the extramarital affair because that is something that happens. Marriages fail. It's sometimes two people's fault. It's very, very rarely 100% one person's fault. Just because Johnson has a history of sexual incontinence and fathering children all over the shop, some of which he publicly acknowledges, some of which he moves heaven and earth to avoid publicly acknowledging, doesn't mean I don't know the privacy. I don't know the details of his last marriage's failure any more than I know the details of what on earth would have attracted Carrie Symonds to a man widely tipped to become Prime Minister in the first place. But I do know this. It's the House of Commons. It used to be front page news if they found smears of cocaine on the cistern of House of Commons lavatories. It probably still is. But the man who is now Prime Minister, sitting on a sofa, enjoying a sex act from a woman who was not his wife. What's happened? What's happened in his parliamentary office? What's happened? Tell me a politician who could have been reported to have engaged in this sort of behaviour, whose career wouldn't be over in a nanosecond. Tell me, if you would, a Labour politician who wouldn't be all over the front pages today if this had been about them, even if in opposition. Imagine it was Keir Starmer or Jeremy Corbyn. Sorry, no one wanted that mental image. Just imagine. Right? I'm not going nuts, am I? This is really, really weird. And what is misconduct in public office? If not a sex act on a sofa in your parliamentary premises? But I don't know, and this is where perhaps I need your help. Is it just because it's him? Is this the most positive proof yet that the rules, the normal standards just don't apply? Look, you can cheat on your wife and remain in politics. Didn't used to be the case. Cecil Parkinson's career was over when he impregnated his secretary, to all intents and purposes. It's only, 40 years ago, if that? And here we are now. Oh, yeah, okay, what else is in the news today? He's signed a big cheque for Ukraine. Let's talk about that. So, have we gone mad? Or is this just the case of me being a bit of a dinosaur and this sort of stuff doesn't matter anymore? And this is the key bit, because I'm not going to buy the argument that this sort of stuff doesn't matter anymore unless it wouldn't matter whoever it was in the centre of this story. So here I am asking you a question that even in these crazy, crazy times, I never thought I'd ask. Does it matter that a foreign secretary in his parliamentary office was interrupted in the middle of a sex act being performed by his then mistress, now wife?